The courtroom was laughing, not loud, but enough to let him know exactly where he stood. A few spectators in the gallery smirked. The bailiff chuckled under his breath. Even the prosecutor cracked a half smile, as if to say, "This'll be quick." Judge Renner didn't laugh. He leaned back in his chair, adjusting his glasses with a slow, deliberate calm. Then he looked down over the rim, eyes fixed on the teenager at the defense table. "Mr. Brooks," he said, his voice coated in dry sarcasm, "is this a joke?" The boy didn't answer right away. He stood still, hands at his sides, posture relaxed but steady. Elijah Brooks, 19, black, wearing a gray hoodie and a clean pair of jeans. Accused of grand theft auto and resisting arrest. He didn't flinch. Judge Renner continued. "This is a felony case. You're facing real prison time. And you want to represent yourself?" Elijah spoke for the first time. Calm, even. "Yes, Your Honor." A ripple of amusement passed through the courtroom. Somewhere in the back, someone let out a low whistle. Renner sighed, flipping through the thin case file in front of him. "The prosecution has eyewitness testimony, a stolen vehicle, and your fingerprints on the wheel. I suggest you rethink your strategy." The prosecutor, Mr. Langston, stood and chimed in, his tone oozing confidence. "We're ready to proceed, Your Honor. But if the defendant wishes to handle his own defense," he shrugged, "we won't stand in his way." Another laugh, smaller, nervous. Elijah didn't smile, didn't blink. "I've read the report," he said. "I've reviewed the evidence, and I'm ready to respond." Judge Renner raised an eyebrow. "Where exactly did you study law, Mr. Brooks?" Elijah didn't miss a beat. "In my living room." The gallery chuckled again until he added, "Every night since I was 13. That stopped them. Not entirely, but enough." Renner sat back. Langston narrowed his eyes. Elijah took a slow step forward, turning toward the jury box. He didn't pace, didn't raise his voice, just started laying bricks. The car in question, a black 2022 Audi, was reported stolen at 6:17 p.m. on a Friday night. I was seen on camera inside a corner store 5 blocks away. At 6:16, he turned back toward the judge. "The timestamp is on the receipt. I paid in cash. The clerk remembers me." Langston interrupted. "Objection. Irrelevant until corroborated." Renner waved it off. "Overruled. He's laying foundation." Elijah nodded in gratitude, then continued. "I wasn't pulled over. I wasn't caught behind the wheel. I was walking home with snacks in my hand when officers detained me 2 blocks from where the car was eventually found abandoned." Another pause. He let the words settle. "The prosecution says I was found near the vehicle. But how close is near? A block? 2? Are we convicting people based on proximity now?" This time, no one laughed. Judge Renner adjusted his glasses again. "Proceed." Elijah took another breath. Not deep, not shaky. Just the breath of someone who had waited long enough to be heard. "They're going to tell you my fingerprint was on the steering wheel. They won't tell you whether the car was wiped for other prints. They'll claim the officer saw me inside, but they won't tell you that officer wasn't even in the area when the theft happened." Gasps. One woman in the gallery leaned forward. Langston straightened his tie. Judge Renner blinked, once, slowly. Elijah stepped back behind the table, still standing, still silent. The room felt different now. Not like a courtroom, like a storm was coming, and only one person knew the forecast. Elijah Brooks wasn't just defending himself. He was about to put the system on trial. Elijah never planned to become a lawyer. He just wanted to survive one. His first lesson in justice didn't come from a textbook. It came from a knock on the door at 2 a.m. Blue lights flashing across the living room window. His mother's voice, calm, controlled. Don't move. Keep your hands where they can see them. He was 9. The cops were at the wrong house, looking for someone else. But Elijah didn't know that. Not then. All he knew was how the room felt. Cold, heavy, like something invisible had wrapped around his chest. That night, after they left, his mother made tea. Sat across from him at the kitchen table. Eyes tired. "You can't panic," she said. "Even when they're wrong, you have to stay calm. Because if they get nervous, we don't get a second chance." That's when it started. Not the fear, the questions. Why had they come to their door? Why hadn't they apologized? Why did his mother seem more afraid than they did? He didn't ask out loud, but he started listening differently. His mom, Lorraine Brooks, worked as a paralegal in a small defense firm. She was the kind of woman who never forgot details, never raised her voice, and never trusted the system, but knew how to work within it. Elijah would sit on the floor of her room after school, watching her flip through folders and scribble notes in the margins. She didn't think he was paying attention, but he was. He'd hear her say things like, "They offered him a plea because they know the evidence won't hold up. The DA's playing politics again. They know he's innocent, but he doesn't have money, so they'll pressure him to settle." He didn't understand it all, but the pattern was clear. Justice wasn't about right or wrong. It was about who had the time, the knowledge, and the leverage. By 13, Elijah was borrowing her old textbooks, looking up court transcripts online, highlighting phrases he didn't understand, then researching them. While other kids memorized lyrics, he memorized landmark cases. At 15, he wrote a 5-page letter to help his uncle get an unfair traffic citation dismissed. It worked. He didn't tell anyone at school. This wasn't about clout. It was about preparation. He wasn't waiting for something to go wrong. He knew it would. It happened to everyone in his neighborhood. Eventually, a wrong stop, a bad ID, a misunderstanding that turned into a record. So he studied, not to impress teachers, but to protect himself. And then, it happened. 17 years old, a Friday night. He and 2 friends were leaving a corner store with snacks and Gatorade. Down the block, a black Audi speeds away. Moments later, sirens. They weren't running. They weren't near it, but Elijah was wearing a gray hoodie, and he fit the description. They cuffed him, sat him on the curb, asked where he was earlier that evening. He didn't panic, didn't argue. He just asked, "Am I being detained or arrested?" The officer blinked, didn't answer, just stared. At the station, they said a car matching that Audi had been reported stolen, that he had been seen nearby, that there was a partial fingerprint match. He didn't cry, didn't call a lawyer. He called his mother, and she said 3 words. "You prepared?" He said, "I think so." Over the next 2 days, he gathered everything. The time-stamped store receipt, the street camera screenshot, the GPS data public records, the police report, and its contradictions. He didn't wait for someone to save him. He showed up to court ready to defend himself, not just from the charges, but from the assumptions. Because by 19, Elijah Brooks knew something most people never learned. In a broken system, the truth doesn't matter unless you know how to make it count. The court reconvened after a short recess, but this time, it was different. The air had changed. There was less smirking, less whispering, more eyes watching, more silence waiting. Elijah stood at the center of it all. Not like a scared teen defending himself, but like a man who had brought the whole building to court. Judge Renner looked down from the bench, brow tight. "Mr. Brooks, you may continue." Elijah nodded once. No wasted movements, no ego in his voice, just the facts. "Let's talk about fingerprints," he said. because the prosecution seems to think that's their smoking gun. He turned toward the jury. They found one fingerprint of mine on the steering wheel of the stolen Audi. Just one. But they didn't find prints on the gear shift, the door handle, the mirror, the radio, the window buttons. Just one. A few jurors leaned forward. "That's strange, isn't it?" Elijah asked, voice low and level. "Anyone who's ever driven a car touches more than one place. Always." He walked to the evidence table, held up a copy of the lab results. No chain of custody. No certified specialist testifying today. Just a single fingerprint, and a whole lot of assumption. He let the paper fall flat onto the table. "Let's be honest," he said, turning back. "If I was anyone else, they might have asked more questions. But when you look like me, proximity is enough. One print is enough. Silence is guilt." He didn't let them sit in the discomfort. He kept moving. "Next, let's talk about Officer Dalton." Langston stiffened. He knew what was coming. Elijah held up a GPS map. Public records, time-stamped dispatch logs. According to official vehicle logs, Officer Dalton's patrol car was 14 blocks away when the car was stolen. 14. He pointed to the spot on the map. So when he said in his report that he saw me inside the vehicle, he turned toward Judge Renner. That couldn't have happened. Langston stepped forward. "Objection. These logs haven't been authenticated. Yet," Elijah finished. "But I'm formally requesting the court subpoena the GPS data from the department to verify it." Renner sighed, rubbed his temple, then nodded. Request granted. The gallery stirred. Some spectators were whispering again. But not with laughter this time. With realization, Elijah stepped back, let the moment breathe, but not for long. He pulled out one final sheet of paper, held it carefully, almost like it mattered more than the rest. Because it did. This is the initial police report filed by the vehicle's owner, Mr. Harland. Langston's face drained of color. I quote, Elijah said, "I left my car running outside the gas station. I saw the person who stole it. He was white, medium build, hoodie. Not the guy they arrested." The words hung like broken glass in the air. Somewhere in the gallery, someone gasped. Another voice whispered, "No way." Elijah held the report up for the jury to see. That statement was in the file. But the prosecution never mentioned it. Never submitted it in discovery. Never showed it to you. He looked at Langston, then at the judge, because it didn't fit the narrative. Langston stood frozen. Judge Renner leaned back in his chair, staring forward in silence. "I wasn't in the car," Elijah said. "I wasn't running from anything. I wasn't even close when it was taken. All I had was the wrong face, in the wrong neighborhood, at the wrong time." And with that, he stepped back, calm, centered, composed. The room didn't explode. It just stopped, like the wind before a storm. Because the boy they laughed at, he had just torn a hole through the prosecution's case. Without shouting, without rage, without raising his hands once. He didn't argue. He dismantled. Judge Renner sat back in his chair, his face unreadable. But something had shifted. The tone, the tension, the weight of what had just been said. The gallery was silent now. No whispers, no movement. Just the kind of stillness that comes when truth punches through assumption. Langston tried to regroup. He shuffled his papers, cleared his throat, stepped forward. "The prosecution maintains..." "Maintains what?" Elijah asked. His voice wasn't raised, but it cut through the courtroom like a wire pulled tight. That a single fingerprint is stronger than a witness statement? That a vague description overrides actual identification? That convenience beats accuracy? Langston hesitated, then leaned in. The defendant was in the area. That's not disputed. Elijah nodded. "You're right. I was. But being in the area, doesn't make me the one who did it. He stepped closer to the jury, his hands still by his sides. No theatrics, no drama, just clarity. Let me ask you something. If you were walking home tonight, and a crime happened 4 blocks away, and someone said you matched a description, would that be enough to put you in a cage? No one answered. They didn't need to. Elijah continued. This case isn't just about a car. It's about what happens when the system doesn't stop to ask questions. It's about what gets lost when we assume people like me must be guilty. He turned to Judge Renner. You've seen thousands of cases. I know that. I respect that. But let me ask you, when was the last time a 19-year-old black kid walked into your courtroom and asked you to listen? The room held its breath. Renner's lips parted, but no words came. Just a quiet exhale. Elijah didn't wait. He turned back to the jury. They told you I ran, but they never showed you footage. They told you I was seen inside the car. But the officer wasn't even close when it was taken. They told you my fingerprint meant guilt, but never brought in the person who lifted it. He took a final breath. Let it out slow. I'm not asking you to trust me because I speak well. I'm asking you to look at the facts. Because in this system, if the facts don't speak loud enough, people like me don't get heard at all. He walked back to the defense table, sat down, folded his hands, said nothing else. Langston stayed frozen at the prosecutor's table. The color drained from his face. All the sharp confidence from earlier, gone. Judge Renner sat still, then finally leaned forward. Mr. Langston, he said quietly, does the state have anything further? Langston opened his mouth, but closed it again, then shook his head. No, Your Honor. The judge nodded slowly, then turned to the jury. This court is adjourned for deliberation. His voice was heavy, measured. The gavel fell. Once, twice. The sound echoed louder than before. Outside, reporters scrambled to get the story. Inside, no one moved. Because everyone in that room, from the clerk to the stenographer, had just witnessed something they weren't ready for. Elijah Brooks hadn't just poked holes in a case. He had held up a mirror, and for the first time, the system blinked first. The hallway outside courtroom 2B smelled like old carpet and coffee. It was quiet, but not peaceful. Just waiting. Elijah sat alone on a wooden bench, back straight, hands folded. He looked calm, but his fingers twitched, just barely. Across from him, his mother stood leaning against the wall, arms crossed, eyes closed, breathing slow. She hadn't said a word since the judge dismissed the jury for deliberation, not because she was angry, because she knew this part too well. The weight, the doubt, the way hope could turn into disappointment without warning. She finally spoke, quiet, measured. You scared me in there. Elijah looked up. How? Because I forgot you were still 19. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You stood there like you've done this your whole life. He gave a small shrug. Felt like it. She nodded, then walked over and sat beside him. For a few seconds, they just sat in silence, the kind only a mother and son could share. Not forced, not awkward, just real. Did I do too much? He asked suddenly. She turned to look at him. You did what they never expect us to do. You told the truth. He nodded slowly, then leaned forward, hands clasped tighter now. What if it's not enough? His voice cracked, just slightly. What if the jury sees me? Not the facts. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper, handed it to him. Read it. He opened it. It was a handwritten note, one he'd written years ago. Middle school. Sloppy handwriting. Big dreams. When I grow up, I want to help people who get blamed for things they didn't do. He smiled, shook his head. You kept this? She looked at him. It wasn't just paper to me. It was a promise. He folded it back up, put it in his pocket, didn't say a word. Just then, the door opened. A court officer stepped out. They've reached a verdict. No reaction from Elijah. No panic. No breath sucked in. Just one final exhale. He stood. His mother adjusted his collar. "No matter what happens in there," she said. "You already did something bigger." He raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" She leaned in, kissed his forehead. "You made them see you." The jury filed back in. 12 people. 12 faces Elijah would never forget. Some avoided his eyes. Some looked directly at him. No smiles, just gravity. Judge Renner cleared his throat, nodded to the foreperson. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" A woman in a navy blazer stood. Voice clear, hands steady. "We have, Your Honor." The room held its breath. "In the case of the state versus Elijah Brooks, we find the defendant not guilty." Silence. Then whispers, gasps. A few murmured yes from the gallery. Elijah didn't move, didn't cry, didn't smile. He just closed his eyes for one full second and breathed. Renner looked at him for a long moment, his voice softer than it had ever been. "Mr. Brooks, I suggest you think about law school." Elijah opened his eyes, met the judge's stare, and said, quietly but clearly, "Already did." Outside the courthouse, the sky had shifted. Overcast now. Cool air, reporters everywhere, cameras, microphones, questions flying. "How did you do it? Did you always plan to represent yourself?" What's next for Elijah Brooks? He said nothing, just kept walking, until he reached the steps, where his mother waited. She pulled him into a hug, tighter than the courtroom allowed. Across the street, Judge Renner stood by his car, watching. No smirk, no gavel, just a man, reconsidering. Elijah turned one last time, looked at the building behind him. Not with hate, not with fear, but with something rarer, resolve. Because now he knew this wouldn't be his last courtroom. But next time, he wouldn't be the defendant. He'd be the one standing for someone else. That wasn't just a victory in court. That was a reminder that truth, when spoken clearly, still has power. If this story moved you, share it. Someone out there needs to know they're not alone. Subscribe to KaYi for more stories that challenge the system. Uplift the unheard. And remind us all what justice is supposed to look like. Because next time, it might not be Elijah. It might be someone you know.